If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Think Generational Wealth podcast with your host, Amir Estimo. In today's episode, I first want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. You could be listening to any podcast in the world. There's millions of podcasts, but we could always get money back, but we can never get time. So I do appreciate that you're taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hopefully this podcast brings some value to you or this episode brings some value to you, and it can jumpstart you for you to take action. As the topic today is, do you have your affairs in order? Which would be centered around will and estate planning. So recently I did a Zoom record with a buddy of mine, Jimmy Jean, who you guys have been following this podcast, you would have noticed he's been on some of the older episodes, but right now we are working on doing some Zoom recordings, and we're going to upload a YouTube channel so you can be able to see us visually and be able to go in there, get some information. Hopefully the information we're providing for you brings value to you. So the reason I am inspired to do this episode was because of all the things that we got going on right now currently in the world. As we all know, we are currently dealing with this pandemic, the coronavirus, COVID-19, and pretty much it shut down the world's economy for the most part. And the one thing I think we don't take into consideration is, do we have a will in place? How is our estate planning? Because these things are pivotal and important, especially around these times, because we don't think about these things, because our minds as human beings, we think that these things belong to, or only rich people are doing these things, or wealthy people are doing these things. You'd be surprised how many wealthy people do these things. But this is also, we as people who are middle class people can also benefit from this. Now, we know an estate planning or estate is basically all the assets that you accumulated while you're alive, for the most part. If you have a car that you own free and clear, house you own free and clear, maybe some businesses that you own, maybe a life insurance that's considered an asset, all this is part of your estate. So when you pass away, you want to be able to pass this down to the next generation. But you'd be surprised. Celebrities who had an estate, but they didn't have a will. Now, a will is who these assets will go to when you pass away. For example, again, as I was saying, if you own a home, if you own a car or any type of asset that you accumulated while you're alive, once you pass away, to be able to not have your family go through all this chaos of trying to figure out who gets what, then your will is put in place. It's a legal document that is drafted up, put in place. So when you pass away, these things, it will be divided amongst each other. amongst your kids, amongst your family, brother, sister, whatever. You could also leave some of your assets to a church that you go to a foundation that you believe in, that you donated to, whatever it is. That will that you have in place will do that for you. Now, you can go check it out, and you can go look up celebrities who passed away who did not have a will in place. Prince, Aretha Franklin. You'd be surprised. I was surprised at the fact that these people didn't have this in place, considering that their status as quote unquote celebrities, but they didn't have no one in their circle that even hinted or even brought up the fact that they should have this in place. Because once you pass away, if you don't have a will in place, what happens is now the government, well, first of all, your family is going to have to hire lawyers, which benefits from this because they would have to, law wise and stuff, they would be the ones who would have to go in. Your family's paying lawyers. Lawyers' fees are exuberant, expensive as it is. And then to turn around, let's say you didn't have a will in place, and the government now has to make a decision based on who gets what. And at the most part, sometimes the government ends up just keeping all this stuff, keeping all your assets. You do not want everything that you worked hard for while you were alive. And the whole fact is you want to be able to pass down generational wealth, whether it's knowledge, whether it's assets, materials, whatever you define generational wealth to you, and only for the government to be making decisions based on your assets. So that's why I pose the questions. Do you have your affairs in order? It doesn't matter if you have $5 in your name, $10 in your name. You have a bank account. You can even have 50 cents in your name. That is still considered an asset, and it contributes to your net worth. But while you're alive, I think it's very important and pivotal to be able to have this in place, because you don't want to wait the last minute for you, or you don't want to wait until that time comes, because we program ourselves to believe we have time. We have next year, we have tomorrow, we have next week, we have next month. But two things is promised, is death and taxes. And one thing is not promised, is tomorrow. So if you don't have these in order, guess who now has to deal with your lack of action, with your lack of preparation? Is your family. Your family now is going to have to deal with all of this nonsense towards the end. So while you're alive, make it a point of emphasis. Doesn't matter how old you are. Make it a point of emphasis to get this done, get a will done. Because you don't have to wait. It's not something you have to wait until your 60s, 70s when you're almost ready to die, or when you get to that point, or if you get to that point, then you're waiting till the last minute to be able to do all this. Get it in order, get it in place while you're alive. So ask yourself this question. Do you have your affairs in order? Again, ask yourself that question. And if you don't, I'd like to recommend Net Law, which is, you believe it or not, Net Law is actually pretty cheap, considering if you go have a lawyer do it for you, and lawyers could probably charge you tens of thousands of dollars to get your will in place in case you pass away. So Net Law is actually running a special currently right now up until I think the end of April, where you buy one and get one free. And actually, you can even pass that down to a relative, a friend, whoever you're choosing, and they also can get their will in the state, in place, and get that also taken care of if you want. I mean, I'd even suggest if you're going to pass it down to a friend or relative, split the cost. The cost, you can find out more information. Go on www.netlawinc.com or netlaw.com and look for information. Or if you want, you can contact me at thankgenwealth@gmail.com, and I can send you the link, and you can go ahead or I can help you even get registered, because this is very, very important, folks. Now, I know this podcast is listened to across the world. There may be someone that's in another country. I don't know, but you can, if you're interested, send me a message and then I can find out the information for you and I can get back to you on it. But I think this is important, especially for generational wealth. You build up all this wealth only to let the government come and swoop it all up. And you don't want that. Your family don't want that. And future generations don't want that. So take that in consideration today, folks. Today's topic is, do you have your affairs in order? And if you don't, even if it's not, you don't work with NEFLAW, find somebody, go and search on Google who can be able to set that off or set your will up for you. In closing, my mother, who's an immigrant descendant, she called up a meeting between me and my brother. And it's surprisingly that meeting was about her will. So she passed away, who gets what. So when that day comes, me and our brother, we're not fighting back and forth who gets what this does. There's already a plan in place. So if a woman of immigrant descendant knows to get this done, I think we who are here in the U.S. born, or like I said, I don't know all the other countries how theirs work, but here in the U.S., this should be an importance. Make it a priority today, not tomorrow. Make it a priority today. Go and take action and get this taken care of. So in the meantime, everybody be safe. Stay home. The quicker we stay home, the quicker we can get past this pandemic, the quicker we can be out and about getting back to our lives. So until then, what should everyone be thinking? Generational wealth.